In this lesson today, we're going to be looking at how to calculate simple interest. Now, every one of you is at some point going to be dealing with either paying interest or maybe you invest money and you earn interest. So whether you're borrowing money or investing it, we can figure out how much interest or how much extra you're going to be paying or what money you're going to be earning. So let's look at this. We have here a simple equation. You just need to know what each of these letters stand for. So what is simple interest? Simple interest is the amount of money paid or earned for the use of money by a bank or other financial institution. So let's say you want to buy something and you don't have the money to buy it. You go to the bank and you say, hey, bank, I want to buy a $5,000 car, but I don't have $5,000. Can I borrow the $5,000? And the bank will check into your credit and see if you're worthy. And if you are, they'll say, sure, you can borrow $5,000, but you're going to have to pay us a little extra. You're going to have to pay a percentage rate of interest back to us. That's how we make money. We're not just going to loan you $5,000 and you give us back $5,000 because then we're not making money. So that works if you're borrowing money. Let's say you're investing money and you invest money into an interest-bearing account. Let's say you invest or you put $3,000 into an account and it is gaining interest. Then after a year or 2 years or 3 years, you can use this equation to find out how much do I have in my account now. So what do each of these letters stand for? If you're taking the notes, you'll want to take the notes as you see it up here and label each of the letters and put whatever information you need to tell yourself so that you will be able to remember what they are. The I is the amount of interest. So this is how much extra I'm paying the bank for that $5,000, or this is the amount I'm earning from the amount that I invested. It's the interest. The P stands for what's called the principal. This is the amount of money that I invested or the amount of money that I borrowed. If I'm borrowing $5,000 for the bank from a car, that's the principal. If I'm depositing $3,000 into an interest-bearing account, that's the principal. It's how much money being invested or borrowed. R is called the rate, interest rate. The rate is always going to be a percentage. Now, in order to do our calculations, we're going to have to be converting decimals to percents and percents to decimals. Before you can do the multiplication, this percent is going to have to be turned into a decimal. Remember to do that, remove the decimal 2 places to the left. So that would be 5/100ths as a decimal. And the T stands for time, and this time is always based on the number of years. So if we know the information, we're just going to plug it into this equation and we're going to use our calculators and solve. So up at the top here, I have the same thing that we just did, I equals PRT. So let's see what this looks like. Find the simple interest to the nearest cent. So let's say you borrowed $1,000 to buy a new cell phone. The bank wants you to pay back 4.5% interest and you have to pay for it in 2 years. How much are you going to pay in interest? We're going to plug these numbers into the equation. So we're looking for the amount of interest, so that's what we're looking for. P, the principal, is the amount that you borrowed. That's the $1,000. The 4.5% is your rate, so we move the decimal 2 places to the left. That would be 45 thousandths. And T is 2 years. So here's our principal, our rate, and our time. If we plug those into the equation, the amount of interest equals the principal of $1,000 times the rate that we turned into a decimal times the 2 years. And now you plug that into your calculator and you find out the amount of interest was $90. So if you were borrowing $1,000, you would have to pay back to the bank the $1,000 you borrowed plus the $90 in interest that the bank earned for loaning you the money. Here's another example. Find the simple interest to the nearest cent. $22.50. Let's say we're investing this time and we deposit $22.50 into an interest-bearing savings account. That's our principal. The percent is the rate, and we're going to convert it into a decimal by moving the decimal point over 2 places. And 4 is the time. So if we plug these into our equation up here, we know that the amount of interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. So there's our principal, our rate, and our time, and we plug it into our calculator. And we find that after 4 years, you have earned $540 in interest. So if your initial deposit was $22.50 and you earned $540 in interest, you could add those two together to see what is now in my account. And that looks like it's going to be $2,790, I think, if I can do my little mental math right here. Yep, $2,790. So now in your interest-bearing account, you have $2,790 because you earned $540 in interest. Okay, let's look at this. Now this one, it's a little more complicated because you have to think about what it's asking you. The equation's going to help you, but it's not always cut and dry. So let's look here. Mr. Gable borrowed $1,860. So this is the principal. This is the amount he borrowed to buy a computer. He will pay $71.30 per month for 30 months. So it's not telling us the rate, but it tells us how much he's paying the bank. Find the simple interest rate. So this is actually going to be the variable that we're looking for, the unknown number. And the time was 30 months. But we need to know those months in the amount of years. And if you convert 30 months to years, that would be 2.5 years. So we know the principal, we know the time, we're looking for the rate, but we don't have the amount of interest yet. So we're going to have to think, now how can I figure out how much interest he paid? So what we can do is we can think about, okay, it told us how much he paid the bank. He paid them $71.30 each month for 30 months. If I multiply those two numbers together, it shows us that after 30 months, he paid to the bank $2,139. Now, is that how much he borrowed? No, he borrowed $1,860, but he paid back $2,139. So now to figure how much of that is interest, you just subtract the amount you paid the bank from the, this is the amount he paid the bank after 30 months. The amount he paid was this. Here's the amount he borrowed. And if you subtract those two, it will tell you how much of that was actually interest. When we subtract that, we found out that he paid $279 of interest. So here's our I, the amount of interest. So we know our interest, we know our principal, we know our time, and it tells us that we're searching for the rate. So the R is the unknown number that we're looking for. So if we take those numbers and we plug them in to the equation, in place of I, in place of interest, we found out that he paid $279 in interest. For principal, we put in the $1,860. Here's the amount of time in years, and then rate. Now I know you're saying PRT and you put PTR. I didn't put the R, but remember the community property multiplication, you're multiplying these three together. It doesn't matter what order they're in. We usually put the variable at the end of the equation, so I just flipped the time and the rate. I could have written principal times R times 2.5 this way, but that's not the way we do it in math. We always put the variable at the end because we can rearrange those. So now, how are we going to solve this? We're solving for the rate. When looking at this equation, first we see here that we have two numbers that we can multiply together. When we multiply those two together, we get $4,650. That is being multiplied times the rate. So now to solve for the amount of rate, R is being multiplied by that. So we divide both sides by 4650. Now you're going to divide 279. I know it's the smaller number, and people don't like to divide with a smaller number divided by the larger number, but you always take the top number or the first number, so you type into your calculator 279 divided by 4,650, and you're going to get a decimal. Well, remember, decimals and percentage rates, we have to convert between decimals and percents. This time it's a decimal. In order to find the percentage rate, we have to multiply times 100, which moves the decimal over 2 places. So he paid a 6% interest on what he borrowed. And yes, that did take several steps, but welcome to math in the real world. You have to think a little bit. Now, if you're working on punchline, this could be the first problem on your page. I'm going to do it with you. Michael deposited $300 in a savings account. So this was the principal. This is how much he deposited. 6% simple interest. So here's the rate. When you convert that to a decimal, it would be 600ths. He made no deposits or withdrawals for 5 years. So there's your time. We have our P, we have our R, and our T. What is it asking for? How much money was in his account at the end of 5 years? Well, in his account, think about this. He deposited $300. He's going to earn some interest. So what we're going to do is figure out the amount of interest. But he doesn't just have the amount of interest in his account. He also has the original $300. So we're going to have to add that back to his $300. So let's plug these numbers into our equation. The amount of interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. We multiply these three together. We find out that he earned $90 in interest. Now, had the question been, how much interest did he earn? He earned $90. But that's not what it's asking. How much money was in his account? It was the original deposit and the $90 that he earned in interest. So how much is in his account now? $390. So you have to read the equation, think about what it's asking, and then answer appropriately. But it's all using this equation, I equals PRT, interest equals principal times rate times time. And in our next lesson, we're going to be looking at compound interest.